All right. So I'm welcoming on here this week for Chalk Dirty to Me, Andy Lack, who's the host of Inside Golf Podcast. Andy is typically the first podcast I'm listening to on a weekly basis. He, in my point of view, does an incredible job of giving the most intricate kind of course analysis out there in the business. And I've joked with Andy in the past that, I read his course previews and sometimes just start visualizing a player pool of who I'm going to start looking at. So Andy, welcome on. I'm really happy to have you.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure. I mean, we've been DMing a bunch. So it's great to finally meet you. But yeah, we started talking about DFS, and very early on in the conversation, I was like, "Oh, this guy gets it." And not a lot of people do. So I am super excited to talk shop with you this week. I think we got a fun week in store.
Yeah, Andy. So let's get into it. I wanted to just tell a quick story, and I was telling this to Andy before, and I haven't really told this, on the show before because it just hasn't come up. But the biggest takedown I had for DFS was funny because it was a funny week because I saw Andy had posted something about golf content and needing help, and I reached out and was extending the hand and saying, I started doing this. I've hit a few outrights. Here's my background. And, the job filled pretty quickly, I'm sure, whatever. And, that weekend, and this is why I'm telling the story. And it's hopefully a good luck omen, I think, for this week as well. That weekend was my older sister's wedding, and it was the same, weekend as the CJ Cup, which was West Coast event, and I was out on the East Coast in New York for the wedding, and I was kind of ushering, I guess you could say, the Saturday night festivities. And because it was Saturday night East Coast, it was like right in the heart of the CJ Cup. And I hadn't checked DFS. I didn't even know, I'd entered 40 lineups that week, and I was unable to check my phone because I was literally standing in front of like all of my family and my extended family and like their friends. And if I checked my phone, my dad would have known that I was checking my the golf scores and might have like chopped my hand off. So couldn't do that. But long story short, I wake up the next morning and I'm in second and third place in the CJ Cup, and I end up taking down first and second, and I think fifth and 10th as well. And what was even funnier, I think, that I didn't mention this to Andy beforehand, but what I decided to do when I won my first GPP is I'm a huge Red Sox fan. I don't know if you guys can tell by the thing back there at Fenway Park. It was during the ALCS. I bought 2 seats on the Green Monster, and I told one of my friends, hey, we're shipping up to Boston. And he booked a hotel, and I had the 2 tickets on the Green Monster, and Kyle Schwarber hit a grand slam. Red Sox smoked the Astros, went up 2-1, ended up losing the series, but I was floating for a few days. And Andy, I think that we're going to try to regurgitate kind of that magic this week. So
Yeah, I mean, I have a big wedding this week, so I hope that that's a good omen. It's funny. My best week in DraftKings ever was the Sony Open. I won Mayo, and I came, I think, second in the $200 single entry, and that was just the best week, the most profitable week that I ever had. My core just really hit that week, and that weekend I didn't watch 1 second of that tournament. Like, I was on a golf trip in Santa Barbara with my friends, and I didn't really check scores until late on Sunday afternoon. So sometimes it's those weekends when you're like sweating them the least, where it really just kind of comes through for you.
And this is the vibe type of week, not a big. I think it's a more low key week. The Travelers,
Right.
right after a major. So I guess before we get into the Travelers, and just because I have you on, and I appreciate your view so much, there's no one else I'd rather recap the U.S. Open quickly with than you. So as my guest, I'll let you go first. What do you think of the course? And, you know, who else, you know, with Fitzpatrick, who else I think impressed you? And what were your biggest takeaways?
So I was okay with the way that the course played. You know, I will say this, the USGA has it's no longer Mike Davis, who used to run the US Opens in kind of the late 2000s. It's Mike Wan and John Bodenheimer, and they've kind of made it pretty clear that they're going to teeter closer to the edge of they don't want players to complain, right? Like we're not going to get a Shinnecock situation in 2018 or 2004 where they lose the course and you're getting a winning score of like 1 over par, right? And I'm okay with that. I kind of think that US Open should be the one tournament that teeters on unfair. I think that a true US Open should have players complaining, and I think that the country club as a golf course in terms of the challenge that it brought architecturally, it could have gotten there, right? Like this tournament could have been won at 1 over par if round one, round two, and round four played like round three, right? And the reason why only round three was the one that played like that, well, there were a couple of reasons. First of all, they watered the greens on Friday afternoon, which was a terrible decision in my opinion. And, they were a pretty lenient and forgiving with some of their pin positions. There were a lot of like middle pins. They could have gotten a lot more provocative with some of the pins, which I would have liked to see. But for the most part, I thought the course held up really well. Like I said, if we're picking nits, I would have maybe liked to see it play a little bit more challenging. But as a venue, I think the country club is all that I'm looking for in a test. And to be honest with you, I hope they make it a regular part of the rotation, man. I know you're a Boston guy, so I'm sure you'd love that as well. But I loved just aesthetically kind of everything about the country club as a viewing experience. I thought it totally delivered.
Yeah, I agree. The course I thought was beautiful, but I do totally agree with you. I think last year's winning score was 6 under-ish as well. And I think
Yeah.
that was a number again this year. I'm totally with you. Like the Shinnecock Hills, as much as the players complained, like sometimes those are the most entertaining tournaments. And I get
Right.
it. You definitely don't want that every week. That would just be a beatdown every week. Like it would just it would just
Yeah.
really start taking its toll. But it is the US Open. It does have that kind of like that's kind of the, I guess, reputation you could say.
Identity. That's what the US Open's identity is, right? Like, and I heard this point, I think it was the No Laying Up guys talking about it. Like, what's the difference between the PGA Championship and the US Open in terms of course setup now? Like, US Open is supposed to have its own distinctive identity. The PGA Championship is supposed to be the one that gets won at 6 under par.
Yeah. Yeah. So I totally agree. I love the actual just look and feel of the course, just because it's like so, and I'm sure you appreciate this as well. It's just so traditional. It's like so old school, but like it's nice old school, if that makes sense. It's like not deteriorating. It's like a beautiful, like well reserved, traditional old, and it has that feel. I feel like, and I haven't been there, but my dad has, and he was there for the 1999 Ryder Cup, of all times to be there. And he wasn't there for the big comeback round. He was there for a practice round, but that place just has a magic about it with some of the, I mean, we met, and then the 99 Ryder Cup and all of the majors before this one ended in a playoff. This major, before we move on, I mean, Fitzpatrick, 8 shot on 18, stones, absolute stones. Zalatoris, he's three runner-ups, 6 top 10s, 10 majors. He'll win a major, right? And what I feel for the most about Zalatoris, regardless of the bet slips, because I had a massive ticket on him, and he was like, as he wasn't a lot of people's, like like one of their bigger plays in DFS. He wants to win like you can tell with him, he wants to win a major. Like he's been dreaming about it his whole life. And I know all the guys have, but he's teary-eyed after the PGA Championship. He was teary-eyed again after the US Open. And like, it's like, this guy's so fucking good at golf. Excuse my French. And he like, it was where I thought he was going to fall apart on Sunday, and he almost did. And then he just flipped a switch. He had like 6 birdies, I think, like on the last, whatever it was, 12 holes, and like just misses the putt on 18 after the shot Fitzpatrick had. You got to think like it's going in the playoff when he goes in the bunker. And I mean, Fitzpatrick, that was you know, maybe it's going a little under the radar. Maybe it's not. Maybe I just think regardless of how good the shot was, I think the balls it took, because he could have laid that up and then, you know, still tried to chip it in and go up and down and save a par. And he just flew it over and put it to 15 feet. It just kind of stopped on a dime. And it was, you know, he hit it low. He was choked up on the club. I would have been, you know, buried in that bunker if I tried a shot like that. So those were big takeaways. Feeling really sorry. And I had the slip as well. Everybody did. I just feel sorry for the guy. I really do, because of he just seems to want it. It seems to just be everything he's dreamed of, just to win a major. And then the last thing is Scheffler, and he'll be the first guy we talk about this week in the Travelers, if you don't mind that. He's the best player in the world right now. And it's funny that you already talked about it on your shows. And this is where it's funny is it's the one thing where people have been talking about on DFS shows, and like the ownership hasn't been changing really.
Doesn't translate. Right. Yeah.
Why is Scotty Scheffler not what, like if he's 12% again this week, I'll take 3x Scotty Scheffler. I'll put him in 36% of my lineups, like maybe even more. Like, I mean, he doesn't have a weakness really. And it's funny, people run their models. I do it every week. He ranks 3rd this week, but you could blind test a course and say any course, no, whatever, throw him on there. And he's a threat to win or finish top 5. So those were my biggest takeaways from the US Open. Yeah, I don't know if you want to harp in on Zalatoris and Scheffler or Fitzpatrick before we move on, but
I mean, no, you recapped it well. I'll just add that I completely agree about Fitzpatrick. I mean, I think the degree of difficulty on that shot was incredibly. I mean, for me, if I'm in a fairway bunker, like making clean contact as the goal, what he had to do was he had to not only make clean contact, but he also had to shape the ball, right? Like he hit this, he hit like a 10-yard cut to kind of get the ball to be able to go onto the green on that kind of landing point. Cause the way that bunker was angled, you couldn't really hit a straight ball onto the green. And you had a little bit of a lip to deal with too. It was artisanal, man, to choke up on an 8-iron like that. Like that was not a TrackMan shot. That was a golf shot, right? Like that's not a shot that you're going to practice on the range. Like that was a shot maker's golf shot. So I'm with you. I think that Fitzpatrick was the worthy champion. I think Zalatoris had the round of the tournament probably to shoot 67 on Saturday in those conditions. And I think this was a tough one for him. I think he probably took this a lot more personally than he did the PGA. I think that's probably a reason why he played Colonial, but then withdrew this week. But I think long-term, man, he's going to be just fine. He'll be right there. He'll probably be right there at St. Andrews. But yeah, that's all I got. I'm ready to rock with the Travelers.
All right, let's do it. So Travelers, I got our spreadsheet up here just so we can look at the different ranges. I figure we just go through range by range, keep it pretty simple, talk about a few guys we like, why we like them, all that good stuff. So as my guest, I would ask you to make the first choice here in terms of the 10. Let's start with the 10K range here.
Okay, so to be honest with you, Scheffler was not part of the original plan for me. Justin Thomas was. Actually, Justin Thomas and Cantlay were kind of the 2 original guys that I was targeting at the top. But I kind of made this deal with myself where I said, dude, if and I mean, I fell into this trap at the US Open where I played Rahm instead of him. You know, if Scheffler continues to go under 15%, you said 3x. Like I may even go a little bit more aggressively. Like if this 12% ownership on Scheffler is real and we're looking at Rory as higher, and I don't like Rory at all this week. We're looking at JT as a lot higher, and I like JT a lot this week. But if you're asking me JT at 18 and Scheffler at 12, I'm going to play Scheffler. And, you know, it gets tougher to play both. And then Cantlay, and I think you have this the same way. I think Cantlay is maybe going to be the highest owned player on the entire slate. Like, I think there's a decent chance that Cantlay is going to be. I think there are a lot of good options up here and no like clear pivots that no one's going to play until you basically get down to Brooks. But I think Cantlay is like a pretty safe bet to fall somewhere between like 20 and 23. And I think it's a good Xander week too. Like I think Xander's going to be in the 15 range, and you're getting a discount, not necessarily in price, but last week he was one of the highest owned guys on the slate. And I guess he quote unquote disappointed people. So, you know, for me, probably at the top, I think generally I play four guys. I have a 20-man pool and 4 above 9K, 6 between 7.5 and 9, and then 10 below 7.5, where I kind of really sprinkle and kind of pyramid scheme it. But for me at the top, it's Scheffler and Xander. I'm going to play some of them in the same lineup too, because I like the sixes. So, you know, it gets kind of shaky quickly if you put Scheffler and Xander in the same lineup, but I'm probably looking at close to like a 50% Scheffler and 50% Xander for me.
Yeah, and I think I actually, it's so funny, like the Travelers, the week where the field, I mean, it is a very good field for the Travelers, especially, but like, it's not amazing. Like the 6Ks last week were like I mean, for me anyway, I could close my eyes and chose one, and I would have been like just as likely one of them to make the cut. So I actually do think there are a lot of options down there, which I do think to the build you were just talking about. I think it's there this week, and I love that. I love getting two guys, you know, Xander and Scheffler. The other guy I think is interesting. I think he's another guy who just like his ownership's getting overlooked, and I get it now because he's higher priced. But you know, he's placing, he's winning, he's doing his thing. If he gets squeezed as well, and I'm seeing him at 12, and again, look, I do these. I was telling you before the show, I'll do another projection tomorrow night. This is as of right now. And if this continues to look at, you know, 12 and 12, what a great way to start a lineup if you're willing to, if you've got enough. And I know this is a little more heavy up top, but I mean, you get 24% between Burns and Scheffler, who you could argue are the two best golfers this year, like overall, like across all the tournaments they've played. So that's an interesting build to me. I love, with a D, Cantlay until I saw the ownership.
Me too.
And I think this could get steamed down a little bit. Like this is sometimes, and I think we were talking about this as well. Sometimes when it gets this juicy, it'll scare people off a little bit. There was a Keegan carpet sweep that nobody, I don't think, saw coming at one of the tournaments earlier this year. I think it was Wells Fargo.
Right. Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah.
So steamed up that it was, I think and this was my theory that I tell you about, a lot of the big players that take up a lot of the market share of each competition you're in, they're waiting till the last minute. So I think they saw so much steam and they were like, screw that. We'll take our, you know, we'll take another 9K guy. He was also priced up that week.
Yeah.
And he pulled the rug and he ended up being like 9%. So, I mean, I don't know if that'll happen with Cantlay. Hopefully he steams down a little bit, because I don't not like him. Rory, I mean, he's got decent history here. Also, what I do here, Andy, I don't know if I told you this before the show, what I added in this week. So this is my model for the last 70, 50, 24, 8, and 4. And then this is a little bit of a trend line. This is the strokes gained data from the Travelers, if they've played in it. Just total strokes gained over the number of tournaments they've played in. This is total strokes gained on Pete Dye courses. And this is total strokes gained on par 70s, less than 7,100 yards. So per
round, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Exactly.
Okay.
So, and what I do every week, sorry for jumping around a little bit here, that's a little different, I think, from a lot of people, is I don't change my model as much as a lot of other people do. I leave about 10% every week on the table that I'm willing to filter to different locations, but I don't move my baseline model, excuse me, that much. I have something I call a baseline model, and then I adjust for it. What am I adjusting for? These are baseline statistics that have nothing to do with anything. Well, now I'm adding, for this week, I decided to add in a little bit because I know that the Travelers, for example, is a one of the, for course history truthers out there,
Right.
one where there is a little bit more correlation with course history. Pete Dye, what I like to do with Pete Dye and Tom Fazio and a few others, when there's an architect where you can get a ton of data from, I don't like looking at one course that they play on the PGA Tour that one guy decides, but Pete Dye, Fazio, they're rolling through these courses, and there is going to be a little bit of correlation in my personal view. A lot of, Pete Dye, there's a course that I was telling you, Echo Lake, the one that my dad's a member at, he designed, so I have some sort of knowledge. There's a certain design, like every way people design false fronts, like, stuff like that. With Pete Dye, it's at every course, and it's not like a say all be all, but I do think there is something to be correlated there. And then I also just like to look at like it to me, it's a little bit different of a game when you're playing a smaller ballpark like this. I wouldn't probably have done a bucket like this if it was 7,100 yards, the course. I probably would have just done like these two. But I am interested to see like these really small ball courses, who's gaining a lot of strokes there. So I just wanted to explain that. And that this is what I came out with this week. So that was the model rank. I don't know if I ever walked through that, but so back to the board, or if you had any questions there. But so it sounds like we're on board for Scotty. Sounds like Xander, I could be in on. Sounds like Burns is an option. And then maybe one of these two guys. I don't know. I don't love the 9Ks this week, so that's why
Me neither.
I might throw one more 10K guy in the portfolio. I'm
thinking the way that I have it set up right now, like I said, I always have 4 guys above 9K. What I may end up doing is my 4 guys above 9K might be Xander, Scheffler, Spieth, and Burns, or I prefer Cantlay to Burns. So if maybe the Cantlay ownership flattens a little bit, then I'd prefer Cantlay to Burns.
Yep.
And then I may just go all the way down to like the next guy I have in my pool would be Webb. Because I agree with you. I think that there's a clear drop off. Like, I think that the difference between, in my opinion, the difference between Sungjae, Niemann, and Finau, who I think are all fine plays, like, I think there's a pretty big gap still between them and Keegan Bradley. And I think that it kind of, that bottom 9K range falls off a cliff a little bit. So I'd rather just go heavy at the top, especially because there's guys in the 6s that I feel underpriced. But the guy I keep going back and forth on is like, what do you think about Spieth this week?
So there was 2 questions I was going to ask. I'll start with Spieth. Spieth, I like this week. I do, because
I think I do too.
I think he's gonna get, I think potentially, well, I guess let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that actually. I am going to be for the 9K guy because I'm totally with you. I think right here, Spieth, Sungjae, Niemann, Finau. I'm gonna play one of those guys personally.
Right.
And then I'm probably gonna do what you did and do three guys up top. I'm a huge Keegan guy, humongous Keegan guy. I love playing him. I told you last week he was like one of my favorite plays. I think you were on him as well. I just like, you're paying up for him and you're not getting a discount in ownership as of right now. So if that's the case, it's a stupid investment in my mind. You don't want to buy high on a guy that everybody else is also buying high on. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Denny McCarthy, for example.
Another perfect example for this week. And I would love to take these guys. I don't think they're bad. I think if you want to bet them, like bet them. But for DFS, and even if they burn you, like in my mind, I can sleep fine at night if a 20% $9,000, $400 Keegan Bradley, like if he's going to be the guy that screws me over this week with like that, then whatever. Like I'll move on to next week and I'll play the same exact kind of theory next week and probably make up for it there. Let's so Spieth. I like Spieth. To answer your question again, it's going to be between Spieth, Sungjae, Niemann. For me, I've never been a big Finau guy, and I get Finau. I just have never been a big Finau guy. I'd rather play Xander if I'm gonna if I'm 9-5 Tony or 10 Xander.
Yeah, me too.
Like I'd rather play 10 Xander. And some people might just say the opposite because like they're very similar. But I don't know. Xander's been like, I know you're a big Xander guy, and I know he's always like this, but like he just shows like fucking so many moments of brilliance. And I'm like, dude, like fucking put it together for 4 rounds. He had one bad round last weekend. I can write that off. It was a shit. It was in the, I think it was Saturday, right? Where he kind of,
it was Saturday. He shot like 76 on the day with the toughest conditions, and everyone freaked out about it. And he ended up losing like a stroke to the field. Like it was fine.
Yeah, I had so much Xander and so much Morikawa last week, and Morikawa ended up like being all right, but I just like,
it was both Saturday that killed both of
them, dude. I had one lineup. I sent a screenshot. I should never have done that to Andy. And it was me in first place in the Fantasy Girl World Championship qualifier. And then fucking fell apart. I finished in like, I don't know, 30th or whatever it was. But that was it's funny what I've been trying to get better at. Actually, quick aside. I'm horrible, Kyle. My DFS strategy is my player pool and number of lineups and lineup building and knowledge about, lineup construction, where I need to construct the line. Like my player pool is going to overwhelm everybody else's player pool I'm playing against. I'm a GPP guy. It's pretty much all I played till recently. I've been trying to get a fantasy golf world championship ticket. I've been pretty close a few times actually, but so what I'm trying to, get better at is identifying which lineup I think is my best, because that's something I'm actually weak at. Like I can give a player pool and like I can do combinations that I think are great, but I always have a hard time saying like I do 30, like if I'm doing 50 lineups, like this is my best one. Maybe some people are better at that than I, but that's not my strong suit by any means.
No, I mean, I feel the exact same way. I mean, we've talked about this a bunch before. It's like when I hit, I want to hit, right? Like my player pool is going to be pretty compact. Like I'm probably going to be playing guys with a lot lower ownership than other people. Like for me, where I feel personally comfortable is like, I do not like clearing 70% in combined ownership, for better or worse. And sometimes that burns me. Chalk's been doing pretty well lately. It's actually done a lot better than I would have hoped for at all 3 of the majors. And I think Kobe, who's been on my podcast a couple of times, described it well, where he's like, my goal in DFS is to get a 6 of 6 on a low 6 of 6 percentage week, right? And I know that if I can get there on a week where a lot of the chalk dies, I'm going to win not some of the money, I'm going to win all of the money. And it's going to make up for the possibility of losing 100 weeks in a row, right? And I kind of have that same philosophy, right? Where like, and I get a lot of people that are sometimes like, oh, you just pivot to pivot, or you're just like trying to be contrarian too much. It's like, no, this is my strategy to play DFS. There are many different strategies to play DFS. If you want to play cash games DFS and try and double your money or 1.5x your money every week, like I know people that do that and have success. Like that's great. It's not for me, but for me, the way I see it is like I am hoping that chalk gets killed, and that's not to say I won't ever play chalky guys. I do play chalky guys all the time, but overall I keep that ownership threshold kind of below 70%.
Yeah, so I typically will fluctuate a little bit depending on the week. And it's typically, I mean, there's a specific calculation you can do to kind of calculate.
Yeah, you've told me about that before.
Yeah, basically the likelihood that the lineup is going to be duped. But long story short, it's depending on the contest you're going in. So last week, 216,000 people you're going against in the US Open. 74% was actually like where that calculation came out to in terms of like likelihood to being duped. So that's what kind of makes major weeks hard as well, I've noticed, because people want the big bucks, and a lot of times it's not to say, this isn't to say chalk is smashing. It's not, that's not to say that, but there's a lot of people, like times like you're so hesitant to throw two guys who had a major you just think are great plays. I could have played
know.
Zalatoris and Fitzpatrick. We're both gonna, like, if you ask me, Kyle, give me three people you think will finish top 10 last week. I'm not just saying this to, like, in general. I think if you asked a lot of people, and again, sometimes it's not this obvious, you would have said Zalatoris and Fitzpatrick. But the problem with that is they garner so much ownership. You're going against so many other people. You can't necessarily put as many combinations as you'd like of those guys. I guess that was the point I was trying to make. But the long story short, the overall calculation like goes down. So like if this week, if you're doing the $5, it's like, again, I think it's against 84,000 people. You could take on a little more chalk if you wanted to. So you could take on like 84%. And you could be like, that's your kind of dupe line in terms of like the likelihood that the lineup gets duped. I typically try to build 10% below that. But I don't change that. If I typically do GPP, I don't, like, if I'm doing a single entry, which I rarely do, but I've been doing more of the Fantasy Golf World Championship ones, like I've been telling you, I'm going against way less people. I haven't necessarily been just eating chalk in the Fantasy Golf World Championships, if that makes sense, just to eat chalk because I can. I still think there's an advantage to having a certain percentage. So that's my quick aside there.
No, man, I agree with you. And you're right. Like single entry, to me, I still try and get super different in single entry. Although, like, I know a lot of people think with single entry, like, oh, if I'm only putting in one lineup, like, why would I want to play this dude at 2% who's 6,700, right? But I still think you can generally find an edge that way if you're trying to take one of those downs. But I agree with you. Like one thing that I've had to come to terms with lately is like, listen, the general public is just getting smarter. Like that's just the reality of the situation. It's harder to win in DFS than it was before. Like, for example, Fitzpatrick missed the cut at the Memorial. And I talked about him on my Sunday show. I said Fitzpatrick missed the cut at the Memorial because he lost 8 strokes putting. He's going to be fine at Canada. He's going to be a great play at Canada. And back in the past, like 2-3 years ago, if a dude misses the cut and they're still like in that 9K, 10K range, like they're not going to be the fucking highest. I'm sorry for cursing. They're not going to be the highest. They're not going to be the highest owned guy in the slate now. Right. But Fitzpatrick was one of the highest owned guys on the slate in Canada, even coming off a missed cut, because now people are listening to, there's all this great content out there, and they have these websites like Rick Run Good and Fantasy National and stuff where they can see all the data. And now they understand like, oh, the only reason why this guy didn't pan out was because he had like the worst putting performance of his career. That's probably not going to happen 2 weeks in a row. So it's harder, man. Like I told you this, I've tracked it. I said this on one show. I can't remember which one I did, but I track it every week. So like every single week at the end of the week, I track how the chalk performs compared to its pivots. And I've been doing it for, I think, like 45 weeks. And I think 24 out of 45, the chalk has outperformed the pivots. So it's like 24 and 21 chalk to pivots. Like it's close, you know what I mean? And chalk is slightly outperforming the pivots right now. So yeah, it's something I'm always trying to like think about week in and week out and get better with.
Yeah, sorry about that adjustment. I didn't like it. I went
no worries.
Didn't like it, but no, I totally agree. And I don't do exactly what you do, but what I like to do, and what people have been kind of doing, a little bit of, like Twitter streams, whatever, I've seen it on there, is for the majors, people do this. I like to do it like kind of just every week, just to check, like this is where I don't know if you can do this with Data Golf if you don't pay for it, but you can get every week. I can get every week this DFS salaries and stuff from last year with the ownership like final. And sometimes what I'll do, not sometimes, I do this pretty much every week. I actually haven't done it yet this week, but I'll just check to see like what the top 20 like finished and what it looked like. Was there a lot of chalk that hit here? Like I'm just curious, right? In terms of what was the optimal build here last year. So look, I don't do, it's not like I do that and then I'm like, oh, I'm building that exact percentage. I just like to gauge it, right? It's like good to know, like sometimes it's tournaments, and we've talked about this as well. And the easiest example is the Masters, but the Travelers is, I guess, a similar example. Like these guys are running through the same course like over and over and over and over and over again. Like that does like make a difference in terms of, you know, how they play the course. So yeah, let's get back into the board. You and I, dude, if we could I feel like we could go on about this stuff forever, like, and just get sidetracked about different golf
I
things.
know. I was going to say we could do a whole thing just on general strategy, but I'm sure people want to hear who we like. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get back to the board quickly. And I'm not doing this as a bit, but I'll tell you why I like one other guy who I think a lot of people are going to be off, and I think he's slightly overpriced, but I like Tommy Fleetwood, and I'll tell you, I'm going to give you the pitch for him. And this is why. So it's the long, I told you I'm a big long-term modeling guy. So if you see this, right, last 24, last 50, last 70, he rates out incredibly well for this course. Also, if you care, not that this is huge, he's played here before, he finished 13th. So he's got trending well long-term, again, long-term. Last 8, not so great. Last 4, not so great. The trend line, good, starting to go down recently. He has good stroke gain data here. He plays Pete Dye courses well. And he actually plays these smaller courses really well as well. So it's like, it's kind of a combination of a bunch of different things. And again, I'm not necessarily even saying Tommy wins this tournament, but a Tommy 9-2, sub 10, top 10, top 5, I could take that, you know, and it's more of a game theory. It's more of a, I'm getting leverage here. And I think this guy could play this course well. And I think another one is Sungjae, but he's a little more expensive. Sungjae and Tommy were both so chalky last week. And like, you know, they both missed the cut. There's that whole, you know, tendency, like you said, of people hopping off. I think a lot of people will hop off Sungjae. I think more people will hop off Tommy.
100%. I think if you're talking the best play in the low 9s, it's got to be Tommy. He's not in for me currently, but you might have sold me on him. If he is
one more selling point. Sorry for interrupting.
No, please.
There's been a lot of people talking about Seamus, and I also like Seamus.
Everyone's betting Seamus.
Everyone's betting Seamus. This is a pretty hefty early projection chalk number. I actually, if you see SaberSim, I mean, like the SaberSim's just wrong here. I think
they're so wrong on that.
He's going to be, and sometimes that happens with websites. Sometimes websites are just dead on like some spot for whatever reason, but yeah, that's another thing we go on and on about. But a lot of hype for Seamus, and I think you're getting basically like very similar players. Like neither guy does, in my opinion, neither guy does one, and I like guys like this actually, but neither guy does one thing great. They just kind of do everything like pretty decently, in my in my opinion. Seamus, I guess you could say, has more upside because we've seen less of him like on the PGA Tour, and he has a win. I don't think Tommy ever does. It's really, I guess I want to play one of these two guys. I guess this is my way of saying I want to play one of these two guys. Maybe I'll let you hop back in.
I think Tommy's a better player than Seamus. Although what Seamus has done in majors recently is crazy, impressive to me, because the argument that I would have made for Tommy is, you know, Tommy's like contended in majors before, and Seamus hasn't really contended, but like he's been racking up like top 15, top 20s. I would say that to me it's pretty easy. What would you say final projection on Seamus comes in, like 14%? Like I think there's a chance that Seamus could be double Fleetwood. I think I could definitely see a universe. This is kind of where I have it right now, is like Seamus 14, Tommy 7. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, it'll depend. I could, and if that really, if that's the case, that's like one of the, you talk about this on your show all the time. And this is where like, you just like, you rip your freaking emotions out of it and just look at what the board is saying. If that's the case, play Tommy and sleep fine at night if it doesn't go your way, because the next time you make a play like that, you're going to look like a fucking sharp, because it's probably going to hit if you do it every, and we talk about it, right? DFS is a long game, and and I love that you have the same philosophy as me, because I think you're like speaking my language in the sense that like, you want to, like, you say this sometimes, I think on your show, like uncomfortable plays sometimes are like the best fucking plays you can fucking make. And they suck when you're doing them. And like 9 times out of 10, like they might be wrong, but as you said before, in DFS, when you cash, you want to cash big. And that one time, you're right, could fucking just just put you in a different stratosphere in the competition. So that's where I'm at. It'll be a little bit ownership dependent. I think Seamus, I think he steams down a little bit because he's another guy that's getting a lot of steam early. I don't think because of what I told you about SaberSim, I think the low ownership, I don't think a lot of sharps are going to play him. I just don't in the DFS perspective, but I don't think that doesn't mean that a lot of people are going to play him. But similar argument, I guess, and I guess you could say this for a lot of these guys this week. You're kind of buying high on you're buying high on Sungjae. You're buying high, regardless of if he's like he was chalker last week or not. Like he missed the cut. Don't think you're buying high necessarily on Niemann. He's actually been probably the most consistent. But like Finau, I don't know.
Well, Sungjae's another good example of it, right? Like if what I was talking about earlier with the public just getting smarter, like 2 years ago, if Sungjae disappointed if Sungjae at 25%, 30% missed the cut at the US Open as that heavy chalk, he would be 5% this week. And he's not going to be 5% this week because people get it. People understand that it's a pretty good bounce back spot for him. And this is a good course for Sungjae. So like, you're not even getting the giant ownership discount that you would get on Sungjae. I mean, he's not going to be like super chalky, but you're not getting the single digits on Sungjae. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. So, I guess that was we can move on to the next range now. We've talked about the 9Ks. Varner could end up, and I'm sorry for even just going and do another 9K. I'm just looking at the fucking numbers here. He's like, actually, if I remember correctly, and like people say Heritage is a comp course, pretty sure he plays Heritage well. Like maybe 21, 30, 10, maybe not as great as I thought. I mean, that could be decent. Now, I think I'd rather go to Fleetwood as my leverage play, honestly, than Varner, and just take 2% more. What are your thoughts on Varner?
I just can't fit him. I don't think like I said, the way that I'm building with Cantlay and Xander and Scotty, like I think I'm going to fade all the way down to like 8.5. Honestly, like I don't.
Absolute. I will just say this. It's a compliment. So I'm sorry for interrupting. You have this, in my point of view, your analysis of the board this week is perfect, because I'm totally with you. And I don't know if a lot of, I don't mean this to be like, oh, nobody talks about this type of thing, but I think it's very important to look at what the board's giving you. And like you're saying, if we were and we were talking about this before, if we're because I'm starting to fall in love with these 9K guys after we've already talked about how the 10Ks are probably the better plays this week. And if that's the case, you're not going to get to as many 9K guys. And it's probably the right thing to do because of what you said. There is a drop off from Keegan, basically, to I think the guy you said who I really like. Sorry. So
no, I was just going to say, like, the top of the 8s, you have 3 guys in a row that people love: Davis Riley, Aaron Wise, Mito Pereira. All those guys are going to clear double digits really easily. They're probably all going to be maybe somewhere around 15%. I don't think they could all get there, but maybe at least 2 out of the 3. And honestly, I think the guys below them are better plays. Like, I really like Webb this league. I think that for the price that Webb is at and the ownership that Webb is at, like, we're talking about a guy that is still going to be like 25% at the Wyndham. And this is another course where like Webb should be licking his chops. He hasn't been as good here as he's been at like the Wyndham or the Heritage, but he's got a couple top fives and a couple top tens. And I'm getting a guy like Webb Simpson and a guy like Mark Leishman, who I also love, who are great fits for this golf course, have incredible course history. You can even throw Brian Harman in there too, who has immaculate course history as well, but I think he'll be a little bit higher owned than Leishman and Webb. But you're getting these two guys in Webb and Leishman that, you know, have won a ton. Leishman's a guy that I just like, if he gets in the mix on Sunday, I just like, I trust him. And you're getting this break on these guys because Aaron Wise, Mito, and Davis Riley are the flavors of the week right now. And that's not to say that those guys are bad plays. I mean, those guys have been playing great. They deserve to be the flavor of the week. I understand why they have built a bit of a DFS bandwagon. They've been coming through and I haven't been playing them, and they've been coming through, which has been frustrating. But like 10 times out of 10, I'm going to take the ownership discount and go down a little bit lower and play those guys that I think are getting squeezed a little bit, because then I think you go a little bit lower too. And Denny is going to garner some ownership. So I think because of that, I think Webb and Leishman are going to go a little bit underowned in my opinion.
So we're right. We couldn't be more aligned in the 8K range. And I want to give you some talk off of the other guys as well, just to reassure these picks, because this is how first of all, Webb, love Webb just thrives on these small courses. You're so right. I mean, isn't his like kid named, one of his kids like named after like
Wyndham.
Yeah. So he loves these courses. He like, that's where he thrives. It's a small ball course. He's low ownership projection right now. And like we talked about, honestly, and what's the difference between Keegan and Webb? Is it $1,000 and
no
less ownership? I'll take Webb and the less ownership and the less price. So love Webb. Leishman, on top of Leishman, you're a big Leishman guy. I know that. On top of Leishman modeling out 28th, having the good course history. One thing there's a few guys, like I joke around with the few people I talk about with golf that I just say are like model breakers. Like Leishman is just kind of a model breaker. And it's funny. We always talk about like Leishman and there's this is what's funny. And you hit on this all the time. There's so many courses where people are like, it's tree line, like they're tree lined, like you have to hit fairways. And for some reason, like it describes the complete opposite of Mark Leishman, but he plays the course well.
Right.
It makes no sense. So on top of that, he has good history, sneaky 14th at the US Open. And if he's 10%, I'll sign me up. So I'm there with that. I'll sell Denny. I'll sell on Denny high. And then the one guy I can't really, and Harman just seems like a perfect fit, which kind of sucks for this course in terms of like driving it straight and hitting wedges. And I'm pretty sure he has good course.
And he's not going to be mega chalk.
I didn't even realize he had this good course history.
It's insane. He's got incredible course history. And to be honest with you, because people like Riley and Mito and Wise so much, like Harman's not going to be unmanageable.
Yeah, he could.
Yeah, I think he'll be like what, 12-ish, 12, 13-ish.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, that's always something to consider as much as I and other people like Leishman. I think you're right. There's more of like this, what some people joke around as like cults for some of these people, but like, you're right. People love these three guys right here. Yeah. I'm actually, I've been big on DR. Aaron Weiss was in both of my biggest takedown lineups. So I have a soft spot for him. Mito, I like. But the two guys I can talk you off of quick, I think easier. I think Davis Riley, as good of a player as he is, thrives with these long irons, thrives on these hard par threes, thrives on these really difficult courses where you have to strap the ball. And I know that you have to put the ball in the fairway here, and I know he can club down and stuff like that. But I'm gonna use that as a way not to play him this week. I think it's a good way not to play him because I think, like you've talked about in your write-up, like a lot more, there's not going to be as many of those shots that I think play into both Davis Riley and Aaron Weiss, also great with long irons. There's long iron shots this week. I know that it's not to say cross them off the board, but they're just not, they're like, that's what makes them great. And if they're shot, like if it was last week and they were this number, I'd play them because like they fit into, I want them hitting the ball far. I want them strapping the 4-irons. I want them tee to green, driving it straight. This is a way smaller course. I don't need them to be like hitting their 4-irons a lot, if that makes sense. And I guess that's
Right.
why I see them as really strong. So that's the way I'm talking myself off of them. And then these two are harder for me because they're great with they're pretty solid fucking wedge players.
Mm.
So I hope I talked you off a few of the guys. Oh, what do you think of Jay Day? I've been hearing a few murmurs about him.
Not for me.
I agree.
I get it, and I like listen. I don't think anybody.
Your reaction, I think, was the perfect. Like that's the Jason Day. If you're putting him in his lineups, that's typically how you feel.
Yeah, it's like I get it. It's the type of play I generally like, but like I'm taking a chance on a lot of these guys in the 7s that I would just rather, and the 6s that like I don't need to find leverage there. Like
No,
I don't. I mean I'm getting. I mean I think Webb is not going to be that much higher owned than Jason Day. You know what I mean?
which is actually, if that's the case, you just crossed Jason Day off the list for me anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
I had heard a lot of people talking about him, so I was curious to get your view. He's a tough guy to stomach though, like, and I know uncomfortable plays. We were just talking about that, but he hasn't delivered in a while on like a big finish or anything. So I think we know who we want in our 8Ks. We're on the same page there. This is the money making range every week. In my point of view, for the most part, the 7s and the 6s where we're getting into. Andy, who we like in the 7s, if you don't mind.
Well, I'll just group like all these guys
Yep.
together. We'll get into all of them with some of the 6s too. So the only real guy that I like between 7.5 and 8.5 is I really like Bezadenhout. That's like the only guy in that range that I'm playing. And then I just think that this like 7.5 to 7,000 range is just like tons of good guys, man. I don't want to give away my whole player pool, but like Cam Davis, I like Johnny Vegas at 5% ownership. Kevin Streelman has almost as good history as Brian Harman. He's won here before, and he's not getting any ownership. I'm a sucker for Doug Gim. I like Aaron Rye a lot too. Like a little bit more squeamish, but we're starting to see some signs of life from Griot, and Reavie are starting to hit the ball better again. I think Lanto's a guy who can win, and he's going to be 1%, right? So I just like this range to me, I absolutely love this week. And then like I think Tyler Duncan at 64 is $400 too cheap, and same with Svensson at 68.
Yep. So I will say, I'll give a few of my plays out because why not? I mean, I'm gonna probably stick away from Steele. That's
right. Just too much. Yeah.
For me, I get it, and it's not that I don't get it. Models out great, whatever, decent course history. I'm just gonna like, there's been so much steam with him lately. It's got, in my view, it's got to, I think, steam off soon. So I'm gonna just continue to stay away from that. Chalk. McNeely, it's tough to be, Wiley, who I think is hysterical, jokes about.
I love Wiley.
His content's hysterical. Like, it's so funny, but his the McNeely Colt, he was spot on the first week he said it. It was actually like really funny.
Yeah.
It was so like it was like, and it looked like it was just wrong, like the projection, he was just right. So that was what made it funny as well. But
I don't think he'll be crazy. I like Mav a lot this week. I bet Mav to win.
I love him as a bet. I love him.
Yeah.
And you talked about this, the whole, I think, Pebble thing, smaller greens here. If you like kind of those different things to look at correlation wise. I think he's played here before and he had like a decent finish, like 30th. Yeah, 30th.
40, yeah, 30th or something like that. Yeah.
So, don't mind that. He could be interesting to look at. That will be ownership dependent, but I do like McNeely for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do though, which is what somewhat worries me. I'm willing to roll the dice on Kisner just because it's similar to Webb, except he has like way less form. But he seems, if there's a course there's not many course like Kisner's a win, like in his career, he's won like a decent amount of events. And for a 7-5 guy, like it's a total like kind of Hail Mary in the sense that he's not playing well. I can rationalize it because it's a small ball course. He has good course history here, but he's got a ton of win equity on certain courses, and this is one of them. I'll play a low owned Kisner potentially. I like Hoagie. I don't know whose podcast I was listening to, was somebody was describing Bubba Watson, describing the course, driver wedge, driver wedge, driver wedge. Hoagie's got them fire wedges. So I'll throw him in the portfolio. Sahith, no, I think this could be a course where Sahith does well. And you said this, I think, like it's a wide variety of winners if you look at the history here.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys, like Spieth's another guy who kind of just does like everything well, like, or at least when Spieth won this tournament, he probably was doing everything well. So Heath is like, again, another guy. And I know this is like, I'm beating this term to death, but like doesn't do one thing great, but seems to do like, he seems to just have like a lot of like around the green game and stuff like that. I don't really know if we know what his potential is. I'll roll the dice on him. And then the last guy, 7K, I like Smalley a lot. Could be, and I'm hoping why I'm like somewhat hesitant. 3.1. I've heard a few other people talk about him. So I don't know. I could see this number getting juiced up a little, but if you like Smalley, just seems like if you were to describe like what type of course he would play at based off of the little I've seen at him, it'd be this type of course. And then the narratives that like I will just give to people because I like to just give like, I have them in my head already because I know these guys. He's a New York guy, courses in Connecticut. He's probably played courses like this his whole fucking life growing up. And he's playing well. He was a 21st, miscut, 27th, top 6. I'll take that. I'll take him. He's cheap, dude. He's cheap. He makes a lot of lineups work.
Yeah. You're safe on Smollett. He's a Duke guy, by the way.
You go to Duke?
I did, yeah.
Oh, nice.
So you're safe on Smalley. I don't think he's gonna get anything too crazy, to be honest with you.
I agree, but it's a little lower than I think I thought it would be, I guess is.
Yeah.
I
think once you get past Steele, dude, I think it's pretty flat down here. Like I don't see one guy emerging as anything crazy. I mean, maybe I know that I have talked some people into Svensson and people like Svensson, but still, I think we're talking like maximum like 7-8% with him. I think it's like pretty flat down here, man.
There was one other guy, I've mentioned him before, and this is not a model play. This is a total field play. I was right on him the last time when I said this. For some reason, this guy, I can't quit this guy, Chad Ramey. And I only say it, he's 27th, 21st. He won some like shit field event.
Corrales, yeah.
But he seems like a small ball course guy, and nobody's going to play this guy. I'm going to take a few. Again, I'm not like the guy who played 10x Denny and won a milli last week, like that crazy. But I will play. I'll play Chad Ramey in a few lineups. I think he's a good leverage play. Again, a lot of these guys, I don't think we know their upside yet. Some people have said Jaeger. I could see him playing well on a course like this, not really as long. He has played here before. I'm a big Lipsky guy. I don't like him this week because he's a guy who I think hits his long iron. Like I think that's what separates him. So yeah, I think I like Chad Ramey as my 6K guy. Quick story. My 6K plays are spot on. And I'm sure this is the case with most people because they're 6K, but they're boomer busts. And I go for that with my 6Ks. I'm not choosing like, let me choose a guy to I, for some reason, would rather choose a 6K guy that I get stuck in my head could somehow win the tournament.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I think they're good names down here. Like I think Tyler Duncan is too cheap at 64. I mean, he feels like, I don't know if he fits that bill because he's pretty safe. Like Tyler Duncan's a guy that he does a lot of finishing in, between 30 and 45th, but at 6,400, if you can finish 30th, like you could win me a ton of money.
Oh yeah.
At 6,400. So I'm with you, man. I think there's a lot of solid names this week. And some of these unproven guys, like a Svensson, a Smotherman, like they just might be really good, right? So we may look back on guys like that and they may be high 7K golfers in a matter of weeks, right? We don't know yet. We don't have a large enough sample size to really determine if they're who they are yet as a golfer completely. So those are kind of the guys down here that I like to take a chance with.
Yeah, the last two 6K guys I'll mention. And just because they model out long-term well, and this is kind of where I sometimes lean, like if I'm having a tough time with some of these, Knox, I'm pretty sure has won here before. And
yes,
everybody knows what Russell Knox is. And I guess the knock on Russell Knox, which I was just knocking everybody else for, like with that in terms of talking myself off of, he seems to be a long iron guy. Like his tee to green game really, like, I think separates on longer courses, excuse me. He like kind of just, I think he hits his like long irons really well. You can't putt for shit, but so that I guess is a way to, but you're buying low on Russell Knox. 4 weeks ago or whatever, people were like 15% Knox at like 7,500, and then Glover. So those were the only two guys I was thinking about in the 6K, and they're longer term modeling out well, and that's it.
Cool. I love it. I think we got some good names this week, my friend.
Yeah. All right, Andy. Well, I will let you run here. Oh wait, what was the last thing I wanted to tell? Or no, yeah, we're all good here.
You sure? You can ask me. I got 5 minutes if you want to ask me anything else.
I was gonna, the quick thoughts on LIV. I guess one thing I'd be interested to know from your point of view, you get a lot of the information. I try to read like all the stuff that's been putting out on this. One thing that I'm interested to get your point of view on, and this is something I don't know if you feel the same way or not. I think that there's potential that the majors actually will ban, not the players that have already qualified, but the players who have not qualified for those majors yet. And if you saw, and it's just something I wanted to get your point of view on, because that has been a huge determining factor right now in terms of who's staying and who's been going. So I read between the lines. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but the USGA put out a statement for this US Open. And there was a lot of read between the lines stuff in that statement, I felt, where yes, they shut it down right now for the play. I think the exact quote was for the players who have already qualified or something along those lines. Well, what if these players aren't getting qualification points going forward? And there was also this ONGR stuff I've been seeing going around in terms of who can actually determine if these events are worth it. But do you think that the majors will take where do you think the majors will take a stance? I know they're a separate entity, but you're such a well-connected guy. I just think it's a cool like way to look at it. Do you like, because again, they're separate entities. So from your point of view, like, what do you think the majors are going to do, or are they not going to do anything?
Well, I think it comes down to the OWGR first, right? Because if the OWGR chooses not to give world ranking points to the LIV Tour events, then very shortly, outside of the guys that have won the Masters, and I guess, Brooks for a couple of years at the US Open and PGA, those guys are not going to be qualified for the majors because they're going to drop like a rock in the world rankings. And unless they do something at like this year's major and next year's major, like they're not going to be qualified very quickly. I think my only pushback to why the majors would be incentivized to let them play is because doesn't this help the majors, right? Doesn't this, now the majors get to say, this is the only time all year where you're going to get to see Brooks Koepka, Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson in the same group as Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas. It's the only time all year is going to be these 4 weeks because those guys aren't going to play the players anymore, right? I don't think Monahan's changing his ban. That's just, a whole other conversation, but I think the way the PGA Tour strategy on handling it, I would maybe consider it, obviously a different, whatever. Anyway, that's again, different podcast, but yeah, man, I think it all comes down to the official world golf ranking points. And, you know, what the majors say basically is they do have the ability because of this to prop themselves up a little bit more as kind of those 4 tournaments of the year where they get everyone, right? That's it. Those are kind of like the 4 tournaments of the year where everyone's going to show.
Yeah, and I think that that's another thing that I have been like disappointed with in the potential future of golf, honestly, is like people are there's 2 things and then I'll let you run. There's 2 quick things I want to talk about. Like the people that are saying that this is better for the game and grow the game. I thought, and this is the one part one. I thought the quote Billy Horschel gave, and my roommate loves Billy Horschel. He'll love that I mentioned this. I've gotten my roommate to become more of a golf guy, and his favorite golfer is Horschel. But Horschel actually gave an incredible quote, like him or not, I thought, about the players joining the LIV. And they said, I think the quote was something along the lines of like, grow the game, right? They grow the game. Has one player talked about how they're going to take the money that they're getting, and it's a ransom of money that they're getting, and actually go back and grow the game? And what I thought was even more impressive and something I never would have even guessed is he said that the PGA Tour, since its inception, has donated more dollars to charity than the big 4, NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB combined. So it was a really smart, it was really and pointed, and I think well pointed in terms of, hey, you guys are growing the game, really, you're taking the money. And not a lot of people have been saying that. So I tipped my hat a little to Billy for that. And that was one thing I wanted to say. I don't know if you saw him chime in.
Yeah. I like that from Billy too. He was just like, dude, let's fucking call it like we see it, man.
Call
like
spade a spade.
Yeah, exactly.
So I liked that. And then I guess the last thing, like, are you disappointed in where the game of golf now is potentially headed in terms of, like you just said, and I guess we have the news that there's this potential PGA stuff coming out in the fall. We won't get into that because that's a whole nother pod. But are you worried? Because what you just said is what I'm like, that's what I'm disappointed with all of this. It's been crazy stories. It's been great for content. But what I'm a little disappointed with, the underlying part is there's been enough names now, like the names are not, they're great golfers. I think 4 of the top 10 in the PIP actually from last year at this point have gone over, and it sucks, right? I mean, these are maybe they're not as great as the other guys. Maybe they're more at the end of their career, but they're great golfers in their own regard. And again, they're probably not as good as some of the other guys currently on tour, but we're now rarely seeing fields where it's the best golfers in the world, right? And that's it's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that I'm probably I think a question that a lot of people are going to get in 2 weeks time when the John Deere field is going up against the LIV field in Portland, and the LIV field is going to be a lot better than the John Deere field, right? You can go to the John Deere's website right now and it's like Daniel Berger and Aaron Wise. It's not great. But to me, I tried watching the first LIV event and I didn't really know what I was watching. I didn't really understand, as a sports fan or a sports bettor, I have a difficult time. I'll speak as a bettor first. As a bettor, I have a difficult time betting on an exhibition. For me, I'm going to bet on the things that I believe I have a legitimate edge on. And I have data on these PGA Tour players, and I have data on the John Deere course, and I'm able to play DraftKings, and I believe that I can formulate an edge for that. And that is the vast majority why most people listen to my podcast, is also hopefully because I'm entertaining, but most of them, to be honest, is to get picks, right? To get actionable info. And I believe that I can give actionable info on the John Deere Classic, even if the field sucks. In fact, I tend to do my best work on the weeks when field sucks. I don't know how to find an edge yet in LIV. I don't know what any of these guys are playing for. I don't even really understand the format. I'd rather put money on the member guest at my club. Like,
Yeah.
it's the same, it's an exhibition. I don't know who cares. I mean, how do you evaluate the mindset of somebody that has made hundreds of millions of dollars and all they're playing for is to get their bank account from 105 million to 115 million? Like, how do you evaluate the stakes on that? I just like,
Dude,
for
that's an
me,
incredible point. I haven't, I'm a big like numbers guy, whatever. I haven't thought, I mean, what you just said, I think is brilliant. I mean,
yeah, it's like we have no data on any of these courses. All these courses suck, by the way. They're really bland setups, birdie fest. Like, it's just, they're not.
they also
So
got the bag of money, like you said, and like, oh, now you're playing these, like in terms of betting and modeling, like all that stuff, which I'm like you, I'm gonna bet on something I think I can find an edge with. But just from like, and this matters, right? Motivation, like people's headspace is like, you can't measure it, obviously, but it does
yeah,
matter. Like these guys, you're right. I mean, it's funny to think about, I guess. I never thought about it this way. Because I was thinking, oh, like they're going to the Live for playing these big money tournaments. Well, guess what? They just got these $100 million contracts to go over there pretty much. So yeah, they're playing in big money tournaments, but like you said, what's the difference between 100 and 103? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
it's basically, it's like, it's the same thing as if you want to bet on the match, right? Like the Tom
yeah,
Brady match. Like, can you say that you have an edge? Sure, but do you really have an edge? Like, who knows, right? So for me, like, as long as until my listeners start asking me whether I'm going to cover Live, until like it gets such a disparity that like the Live is so much more compelling, like, I'm gonna keep betting on the PGA Tour, and keep watching the PGA Tour. And I tweeted something out, like, as a fan, to me, and I understand I'm in the vast minority of this, like, I find it more compelling to watch Sahith Theegala win the John Deere than I do to watch Patrick Reed see his bank account go, like I said, from like 100 to 105. Like, I just, as a golf fan, I think I'd rather watch the first thing. And I know that a lot of people probably disagree with me on that. They just want to see stars. And I understand that perspective. People watch golf for different things. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But for me, and this isn't me just being like a PGA Tour loyalist. I think the PGA Tour is ripe with problems, and there's a ton of things that I would change. But for right now, like, that's where I have an edge, and that's where my money and my eyeballs will be.
Well, Andy, I really appreciate the time, man. I really do. It was awesome that you were willing to come on here, and going through the board feels awesome. Makes us feel like a bigger week than it actually is, but that's kind of sometimes the weeks where we can get our edge. So I hope you have a great time this weekend at the wedding. I hope that we talk about the wedding luck. I think it's going to be a thing, man. I think it's going to be a little lucky charm. So hope you have some good lineups as well. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime. Really appreciate it. Thanks again, Andy.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. We'll absolutely do it again. And hopefully we'll play some golf this summer in New York as well.
Absolutely, we got to do that. Got to do that. Echo Lake, another Pete Dye course, man. I'm telling you, we'll have to figure out the open week.
Yeah, dude,
Figure out how to do
absolutely.
that
No,
course.
that'd be a blast.
All right, Andy. Well, I'll let you go. And
Thanks, man.
good luck again this week.
Thanks, dude.
See it. How do I stop?